Hello and welcome. This week we are back on board with Robin Wall Kimmerer's book, Braiding Sweetgrass, but we're going to be focusing on the tending sweetgrass section. So that's pages 63 to 117, or if you're listening to the Spotify audiobook, chapters 10 through 14. So essentially this tending sweetgrass section starts out with these three simple lines. I'm going to read them. Wild meadow sweetgrass grows long and fragrant when it is looked after by humans. Weeding and care for the habitat and neighboring plants strengthens its growth. So remember last week we read this section where Kimmerer is talking about teaching her ecology class, and her students cannot even imagine positive relationships between humans and nature, as if humans and nature are separate, but that's how she sort of frames the question. Humans and the land, what are some beneficial relationships? And her students couldn't think of anything. So Kimmerer is using sweetgrass. She's braiding the story of the reciprocity and the importance of the human relationship to sweetgrass with this book. And she's doing that through telling us all of these other ways that nature and humans have a positive relationship, right? And she's doing it, rooting it in not just Western academic science, but in indigenous knowledge systems and storytelling. Kimmerer's daughters, the first section is Maple Sugar Moon, and in it, Kimmerer's daughters look back on their maple sugaring adventures with their mom, and they basically joke about how much work it was, hauling the branches and spilling the sap and like everything, right? And they tease their mom about turning them into little sugar makers, but despite their complaints, they also just remember the magic of drinking sap straight from the tree. Right? But she says that the experience, it's not just about the syrup, right? It's a lesson from Nanabozo. She says, nature gives us these amazing gifts, but it is still our job, our responsibility to put in the work and show gratitude, right? We have to be able to receive them. We have to put in the work to receive the gifts and simultaneously be able to express gratitude. So the process of transforming sap into syrup is considered a partnership between humans and the land, right? So Kimmerer writes, I'm going to read a section here. It is said that our people learned to make sugar from the squirrels. In the late winter, the hungry time, when caches of nuts are depleted, squirrels take to the treetops and gnaw on the branches of sugar maples. Scraping the bark allows sap to exude from the twig, and the squirrels drink it. But the real goods come the next morning, when they follow the same circuit they made the day before, licking up the sugar crystals that formed on the bark overnight. Freezing temperatures cause the water in the sap to sublimate, leaving a sweet, crystalline, crust-like rock candy behind, enough to tide them over through the hungriest time of the year. So Kimmerer says that her people call this time the Maple Sugar Moon, and she says, the maples carried the people through, provided food just when they needed it most. They had to trust that Mother Earth would find a way to feed them, even in the depths of winter. Okay, so before we go any further, because I am going to keep reading a little bit from this section, but before we go any further, I want to make sure that we're catching one of the really important things that I think Kimmerer is doing here, right? So she's breaking down the science of the freezing temperatures cause the water in the sap to sublimate, right? And she explains sort of a basic understanding of the science behind it. But she says, she attributes that lesson not to the botany, right? She didn't cite the botanist that first came up with the word to describe the part that did the thing, right? She says that we learned to make sugar from squirrels. So Kimmerer, as an ecologist and fluent in botany, she likely has the resources and sources, period, academic sources, to be able to cite the science of the sugar making, right? But instead she chooses to attribute, to give credit, right, to the squirrels. So that becomes a choice only because she knows how to do both. Right? So before we get into, yes, we're going to learn how to properly cite sources, how to properly find peer-reviewed sources, the importance of scholarly sources, right? And at the same time, we have to recognize that the entire act of citing is political. The sources that you are willing to say that I am thinking, I'm aligned with this thinker, and I am learning from this scholar or whoever it is, that is a political decision. And then even further than that, to then not cite, right? To have the capacity and the knowledge and the accolades. So again, she's unpacking positive relationships between people and the land. There was a custom in the mid-1800s of planting twin trees to celebrate a marriage and the starting of a home. The stance of these two, she's talking about the maple trees in her own yard, just 10 feet apart, recalls a couple standing together on the porch steps holding hands. The reach of their shade links the front porch with the barn across the road, creating a shady path of back and forth for that young family. I realize that those first homesteaders were not the beneficiaries of that shade, at least not as a young couple. They must have meant for their people to stay here. Surely those two were sleeping up on Cemetery Road long before the shade arched across the road. I am living today in the shady future they imagined, drinking sap from trees planted with their wedding vows. They could not have imagined me many generations later, and yet I live in the gift of their care. Could they have imagined that when my daughter Lyndon was married, she would choose leaves of maple sugar for the wedding giveaway? I literally have chills. The twin maples that were planted on her property long ago, before she lived there, they were a symbol of new beginnings, right? This couple starting their life together. So Kimmerer acknowledges that our role is to honor this gift and give back when we can, and in what ways that we can. So she can't repay the trees directly, right? But she plants daffodils beneath them, which is a gesture of appreciation and a nod to the future. So as the sap rises each year, so do the daffodils, which obviously continues this cycle of giving and gratitude. And beyond that, Kimmerer is telling us the story of maples, right? The legacy of the maples and their relationship with newlywed humans lives on because Kimmerer tells us this is the history, right? Part of what she's doing is giving, she's making that offering, not just to the writing itself, but to us. And then in the next section, A Mother's Work, well, this is one of my favorite sections of the entire book, I would say. Kimmerer describes her efforts to restore a pond for her children. So she finds, though, that in cleaning up this pond, because they want this swimmable pond, more than just like removing the visible algae, it means addressing the deeper issue of nutrient imbalance, right? So then her attempts to clean the pond reveal the complexity of the ecosystem that is the pond. And it also reflects the challenge of balancing human desire with ecological reality, right? So as she works, she's reflecting on the broader implication of her actions. So like even well-intentioned interventions, like scooping out the algae, can have unintended consequences, right? She almost kills all these tadpoles. She talks about how ecology is literally about making a home. She says ecology is homemaking. So Kimmerer says the word ecology is derived from the Greek oikos, the word for home. I could use ecology to make a good home for goslings and girls. She says, I was driven to this chore, cleaning up this pond, by a mothering urge to make a swimmable pond. That's what her kids asked for. But in the process, she says, I could hardly sacrifice another mother's children who, after all, already had a swimmable pond. So she realizes that even as she's trying to scoop up this mesh of algae, she's finding these tadpoles and small fish and dragonfly larvae. So she says, short, single-celled lives were ended because I wanted a clear pond. I'm bigger, I have a rake, so I win. That's not a worldview I readily endorse. So ultimately she learns that the act of caring for the pond and for water in general, reflects a deep bond with nature and a commitment to nurturing life in all of its forms. So each task at the pond, whether it was raking algae or planting sweetgrass or observing the changes in the apple tree nearby, that represents a commitment to a larger living system that continually responds to and shapes Kimmerer's actions. And then in the constellation of water lilies, Kimmerer draws a poignant parallel between the care of her pond and the responsibility towards more significant environmental issues like the pollution of Onondaga Lake. So her work on the pond, while it seemed sort of small in comparison, it is part of a larger web of care that extends to the community and to the planet, right? And so this personal effort reflects a broader ecological consciousness, suggesting that every act of care, no matter how small, contributes to that greater good. So the seasonal cycles, the growth of her children, and the eventual passing on of this legacy to future generations illustrates this profound understanding of the interconnectedness of all beings and the importance of nurturing both immediate and extended communities and environments, right? Kimmerer's vision of motherhood and care expands from her own family to the world at large, emphasizing that this true stewardship, taking care of the land, involves looking after all life forms. So in terms of everyday life, Kimmerer describes a world where the act of feeding, right, whether it's animals or family or plants, is a profound expression of care and reciprocity. So each moment of feeding, from the breakfast table to the compost bucket, intertwines with a larger life cycle of nourishment and gratitude. And this cycle is both mundane and deeply spiritual. Remember, we talked about that last week, illustrating how every act of care is part of this grander interconnected system that is planet Earth, right? And Kimmerer navigates this transition of her children growing up and leaving the home, right? Leaving the nest. And she experiences this sense of loss and identity loss too. But this act of feeding, which once then defined her role as a mother and connected to her children, becomes this symbol for the shifting nature of motherhood. So even as her role changes, she finds solace in the knowledge that that cycle of giving and receiving continues. It just looks a little different, right? The metaphor of the pond and its ecosystem underscores this idea that nurturing and care extend beyond the immediate and the personal to really the whole universe. So the lilies, with their life-sustaining network of air-filled cells, become this metaphor for the mutual support that exists between different stages of life, reflecting this reciprocal relationship between mother and child and just young and old, right? Kimmerer, her encounter with the water lilies, with it's a very intricate process of oxygen exchange that she's describing. But this offers a lesson in mutuality and interconnectedness and interdependence, right? So the young leaves draw oxygen from the old, while the old leaves release oxygen back into the environment, sustaining the entire ecosystem. So this exchange reflects these principles of reciprocity, where care and nourishment flow between individuals and across generations, right? And it's not, for example, I have to put it in here, it's not about hoarding resources or hoarding wealth, right? It is about recognizing that the giving is an essential part of being allowed to take, right? She gets these gifts from her cousin unexpectedly, and it symbolizes, again, this really deeply meaningful support that emerges from the world around us through care and love and community. So as she returns home to find the porch with all of these gifts, which I cry every time I read that part, Kimmerer is reminded of this enduring presence of love and connection. And so these gifts each one has this like cute little unique message, highlights the importance of acknowledging and embracing the support and the love that does surround us, right? And they serve as this reminder that even in moments of transition and change, the cycle of giving and receiving continues, right? And we're part of that. So Kimmerer writes, "We are showered every day with gifts, but they are not meant for us to keep. Their life is in their movement, the inhale and the exhale of our shared breath. Our work and our joy is to pass along the gift and to trust that what we put into the universe will always come back." Right? So if you're scared of dying, you can't hold your breath, right? If you're scared of taking your last breath, we know that holding it in is not it's not going to work. So she's essentially saying that the same way that we breathe and we trust that that next breath is going to come, that's what we got to lean into more. This whole aspect of knowledge hoarding and resource hoarding is not sustainable. And so every day we're blessed with these gifts, moments of kindness, opportunities for growth, even just nature itself and its beauty, right? These gifts, while they're precious, are not meant to be hoarded. We cannot hoard them. They cannot be possessed, right? So their true significance is in their circulation and in how they are shared and passed on, right? If I experience the best night of my life and I don't go to my friends and tell, like, it's literally the pictures or it didn't happen, right? We have to share. That is the beauty of living, is that we then get to share the stories. And the reason I want to just pause for a second, because I'm definitely in it right now, but the reason that we're talking about this in this class is because writing, again, as an offering, is a contribution and it is necessary. And I really want us to get out of the habit of thinking of ourselves as either writers or not, either storytellers or not. There's nothing to be gained by keeping us locked in these binaries of I am this or I'm not, right? Everything is a little bit more on some sort of a spectrum, right? And so I need us to start acknowledging the ways that just being human is, whether you like it or not, you're implicated in this network that we're doing of communication, whether it's verbal or not, written or not. We're all participating in it, whether we want to or not. So in the process of writing or creating literally anything, inspiration often comes to us from various sources. For example, personal experience or the experiences of our families or our communities, observations in pop culture, interactions with our friends or anyone really, or just random moments of insight, right? But the creative process involves capturing these fleeting moments and transforming them into something tangible and everlasting that can be shared over and over and over again, right? So your work becomes a gift to others, inviting them to engage with it and find meaning in it and even be inspired themselves, right? This process of creating and sharing reflects the idea of passing along a gift and trusting that what you put into the world will have some sort of reciprocal effect. So you take in ideas and experiences, that's the inhale, and then we produce work with them, and that's the exhale. And then we receive feedback or see the impact of our work on other people, and the cycle continues. And the act of sharing your creations can lead to then new ideas and new inspirations, which again, we can just see this cycle of creativity unfolding. So in Allegiance to Gratitude, Kimmerer tells us this personal little anecdote about her daughter who refused to participate in her school's Pledge of Allegiance, right? And this refusal was not out of like rebellion as much as it was just a thoughtful critique. So her daughter questioned the sincerity of pledging allegiance to a country when it didn't always live up to the ideals of liberty and justice for all, right? So this moment makes Kimmerer reflect on the pledge's role in her own life. So Kimmerer contrasts the Pledge of Allegiance with the Thanksgiving address practiced by the Haudenosaunee people. So instead of pledging loyalty to a political system, this address is a daily ritual of gratitude. So each day, students at Onondaga Nation School recite this Thanksgiving address, expressing thanks to various elements of the natural world, from the earth to water to plants and animals. So this ritual fosters a sense of connection and respect for all life forms and reminds students of, or really anyone saying it, of their reciprocal responsibilities to this world. So Kimmerer describes the Thanksgiving address as more than just a simple tradition. It's a comprehensive practice that integrates cultural values and scientific understanding and ethical principles. So it teaches children to appreciate and give thanks for the natural world, reinforcing their responsibility to care for it. So she emphasizes that unlike the pledge, which can become a form of empty, or even like it fosters cynicism almost, the Thanksgiving address encourages this ongoing practice of gratitude and respect. And it instills this sense of abundance rather than scarcity. The Thanksgiving address challenges consumerist mindsets that drive people to constantly seek more, and instead gives us this sense of abundance rather than scarcity. So Kimmerer concludes by pondering what it would be like if schools adopted a similar practice of gratitude. So she suggests that a shift like that could transform our understanding of allegiance, moving from a nationalistic pledge to a broader commitment to the natural world and its inhabitants. And this approach, Kimmerer argues, could help cultivate a culture of reciprocity where people recognize their duties to one another and to this planet rather than simply pledging to political entities, right? And translating the insights of Kimmerer's allegiance to gratitude into the academic writing process involves rethinking how we approach and how we align our work with both scholarly principles and ethical commitments to our communities. So traditional academic writing often emphasizes rigorous adherence to these formal structures and evidence-based arguments and specific methodologies, which can then sometimes lead to detachment from real-world relevance or community needs or even the language that we speak, right? But inspired by Kimmerer's emphasis on gratitude and connection, academic writing can be reimagined, we can reimagine it in this class, as a process that not only adheres to scholarly standards, but also reflects a deep commitment to the communities and the contexts that inform our research. And this involves integrating local knowledge and perspectives into scholarly discourse, ensuring that our research is addressing our real-world problems and contributes positively to our community's well-being. But, scholarly writing often prioritizes this formal language and this myth of objectivity, which can sometimes feel disconnected from the writer's actual personal, socio-political location and who they are to their community. But by embracing Kimmerer's idea of gratitude and reciprocity, academic writing could maintain its formal rigor while also incorporating authentic voices and perspectives. And this might mean acknowledging the contributions from community members or integrating their insights into academic arguments and essentially reflecting on how the research is benefiting or impacting a community, right? And making sure that it is accessible to said community. So that's what we're aiming to do in this class. Academic work is typically guided by these principles of objectivity and neutrality, right? We have to be neutral, but this can sometimes overshadow ethical considerations of the responsibilities of researchers towards their subjects or towards their communities. So Kimmerer's emphasis on gratitude and reciprocal relationships can inspire academics to foreground ethical considerations and social responsibilities, right? And this means being transparent about the impacts of our research and actively seeking ways to address injustices, ensuring that our research is contributing to the betterment of our communities rather than simply advancing academic knowledge, right? The goal of our research should be to better our communities rather than simply academic achievement or advancing scholarly knowledge. So again, we're breaking the binary. We are not thinking of academic versus non-academic writing. It is all writing, right? But integrating Kimmerer's ideas into our understanding of academic writing, wherever we're coming to this class with, whatever your experience has been up to this point, if we integrate some of Kimmerer's ideas and shift towards practices that both honor this rigorous scholarly standard and also honor the accessibility and ethical responsibility to our communities, it's really about creating that dialogue between academic principles and these values of connection and gratitude and reciprocity. So I think Kimmerer's work here opens up a door for thinkers of all disciplines, right? We can think of the traditional disciplines of like math and English and science and history, but Kimmerer's work opens this door for all of us, regardless of what school of thought we're coming from, to reimagine the way that we are allowed to, that we can put forth our knowledge into the world. So our work, whether it's in the realm of academia or out in our daily communication, it's deeply intertwined with our responsibilities to our communities and to the natural world. So instead of viewing academic work as an isolated endeavor, Kimmerer's insights and her writing, this actual book, encourages us to integrate local knowledge and address real world issues while also reflecting on how our research can serve broader societal needs. Just as Kimmerer emphasizes the importance of passing along gifts and acknowledging the interconnectedness of all life, so too should our academic endeavors be part of a larger reciprocal exchange. And by grounding our research in, yes, scholarly sources, but also in gratitude and authenticity and ethical considerations, we can create richer and more impactful dialogue that reflects both rigorous scholarship and the vitality of our communities. So ultimately, embracing this approach can transform academic writing into a meaningful practice and offering, right? That not only advances knowledge, but also nurtures all of us. It is an act of nourishment to ourselves, to our communities, and to this world. So it's through this lens of gratitude and reciprocal care that we can truly honor the gifts that we receive, and then also, again, exhale, let them out, and make sure that our work is contributing to a more connected and compassionate world. So I'm really excited to see the writing that you are coming up with for this class. Feel free, as always, reach out to me if you got any questions, comments, concerns, and I'm excited to see you next week.